Hello and welcome to our session. We are going to talk about IDE support for Java developers with Bazel. And I'm Peter, and Gunnar's with me as well. First, about me, I work for Salesforce on a microservices infrastructure team. And so we provide runtime libraries and other tools for microservices developers inside of Salesforce. And one of the things we provide is a monorepo. So it's a large shared source code repository in which we have many of those microservices. And that monorepo is built with Bazel. And the main language that is used in that monorepo is Java. And Gunnar?
Hi, my name is Gunnar. I joined Salesforce in 2016, and I'm working on a monolith, not on microservices. And I'm responsible for the build and development experience of that monolith. And we are still in the process of migrating from Maven to Bazel. And this is where we actually need support in the IDEs as well. And approximately 80% of our monolith code is based on Java.
Great. Thanks, Gunnar. And first, I just wanted to show a high-level overview of how these projects relate to each other. So we work on Bazel Eclipse on my team, and Gunnar works on a language server that is used for VS Code integration on his team. And most of the code that we work on is actually shared. So probably 85 to 90% of our code is shared across the two projects in a centralized library that we call the Bazel Java SDK. And that the SDK is a Java library that models the Bazel build and makes it easy to invoke Bazel commands, for example. And so by centralizing it in that SDK, we actually share almost all of the code across these projects and other projects too. So we have a Slack integration with Bazel internally. And so that also uses the SDK. So it's a really powerful centralized library for working with Bazel. And so I'm going to talk about Bazel Eclipse first, and then Gunnar will come in later and talk about the language server in VS Code. And so Bazel Eclipse started 3 years ago, and it was really to meet a need that we had internally. So as we asked microservices teams to move from their custom source code repository with their custom Maven build, and we move them into the monorepo, they have to do some work. So it takes some work to migrate from Maven to Bazel, from their own repository to our monorepo. And so we have migration tools to help them do that, but there is work involved. And so we were seeing friction for these developers, for these teams to move in. And so we're always looking for ways to reduce that friction. And one of the things we realized was not only were we asking teams to change from Maven to Bazel, but for all the Eclipse developers that we have inside of Salesforce, we were asking them to change from Eclipse to IntelliJ. And so it started as a hackathon project 3 years ago. But what we started to do is build the Bazel Eclipse feature, which is, and our goal is to give these developers parity with doing Java development in Eclipse as they would have in Maven with Bazel. And so I'm happy to report that we are there. So as of the 1.5 release of Bazel Eclipse, which happened a couple of weeks ago, we've reached parity. So now the development experience for Java developers inside of Eclipse is the same whether you're using Maven or Bazel. And so we're really happy about that. And as I'll show in a demo, it's a lot easier to show rather than tell. But we model the Bazel the Java class path a little bit differently than what the IntelliJ plugin does. And so as I do the demo, you'll see how those differences play out. And we also spend a lot of time thinking about how to do partial imports because in Salesforce, we have these large Bazel workspaces. We never want a developer to bring in the entire workspace. And so we've put a lot of effort into making sure partial imports work well. And I'll show that in the demo as well. We're also happy to say that we support Windows. And so it's a first-class citizen with our support along with Mac and Linux. And so at this point, we have, as I said, parity with Maven. And what we're working on next is just performance improvements for very large workspaces. We're also going to add some features for making build file editing a little bit better. But then the last major feature that we're really excited about is what we call auto dependency management. And so we have most of this already in place, but we just need to put it all together. But this will allow us, so when a developer adds a new import statement to a Java file, we're going to go behind the scenes and update the build file to add any new dependencies that they need when that happens. So that's hopefully soon to come. And with that, I'm not going to talk more about the Bazel Eclipse. I'm just going to show you. So I've got a couple of demos lined up. And here we go. All right, here we are over in Eclipse. And to save time, I've already installed Bazel Eclipse feature in this version of Eclipse. And I've also imported a Bazel workspace. But real quick, if you need to install or you want to install Bazel Eclipse inside of your Eclipse, there's two ways to do it. We support, and most people have been installing it off of our update site. So that's in our documentation. There's a URL that you would plug into this path and install Bazel Eclipse that way. But more recently, we've started to support the Eclipse Marketplace. And so if you go into the Marketplace and search for Bazel Eclipse, we're the only ones in there. So you'll find us, and this would be an install button if this wasn't already installed. And so I think, this is probably now the more easier way to go. So I'd recommend this approach. And so once you have Bazel Eclipse installed, then you import a Bazel workspace, and I'll show you the import process in a little bit, but this one's already imported. You'll see how we integrate Bazel with Eclipse. And the main idea is every Bazel package that you import, and once again, we only support Java rules, and so we filter out anything that doesn't have a Java rule in it. But in this case, in this workspace, we have 4 Bazel packages that have Java rules in them. And so we imported all 4 of those into the workspace here, and that they became 4 different Eclipse projects. So these are the Eclipse projects. And, I'm not going to go into a lot of details. We integrate, we find the source folders, we find the test folders, etc. And everything kind of works as you expect. If you have a compiler, that'll show up in the problems view down here. And we'll do, type search for you. So you can add types, and we'll help you out there. And so that's all pretty standard Eclipse stuff, and it works pretty well, just pretty much as you expect. The main integration point for Bazel Eclipse with Eclipse is the Bazel class path container. And so what we have to do is look inside of each Bazel package that's been imported and look at the Java libraries, look at the Java binaries, the Java tests, and figure out the class path container. And so what we do is we create a union of all the rules inside of your package and figure out the class path from that. And so in this simple package, we have 2 external dependencies on the main class path. So that white jar icon means it's on the main class path. And then there's 3 jars that are on the test class path. And so Bazel Eclipse does a lot of work behind the scenes with Bazel query and with aspects to figure out the unified class path for that package. And so once we do that, we're able to support IDE development pretty easily. And so the only other thing I wanted to show with this workspace is we also create a global class path with all the jars in the entire workspace. And the reason we do that is when you import maybe only 10 packages of your workspace, and you maybe have 500 packages, not all the jars that you have available in your Bazel workspace may be a part of an existing class path. And so what we do here is we just create a huge gigantic list of all the jars being used inside of your workspace, so that you can do type searches for that. And so with that, I'm going to switch over to another workspace, Bazel workspace, and I'm also going to show import as a part of that. So the way we integrate is with this import wizard, And we're going to go look at another Bazel workspace from our demo set, and it is different Guava versions. And like I was saying before, you can selectively import just a subset of your Bazel packages. In this case, I'm just going to select everything, but that's a way to minimize how much a developer is looking at. They can just import the packages that they want to work on. And so in this workspace, there's the demo is we have two versions of Guava in this workspace. And so this package old Guava is using 18 and modern Guava is using 23. And I just wanted to show you how the class path feature works inside of Bazel Eclipse. So we have in modern Guava.java, we have the use of this class here, which only appears in Guava 23. It's not in 18. So then if I go down to old Guava here, and we try and use that class, it's going to complain because it's not in Guava 18. And so that's just showing you how in Bazel Eclipse, the class path is scoped to the package. And so that can give you some ability to be a little more selective about how you see your class path in each package. And an upcoming feature is something we plan to do with this, which is called auto deps. So the company Wix demonstrated this in IntelliJ a few years ago, and we're pretty close to having this ability in Bazel Eclipse, which is to then give you an automated way of adding that dependency that you're missing to your class path in your build file. But we don't have that quite yet. All right, so that was Bazel Eclipse. I hope you liked the demos. Now we're going to send it over to Gunnar, who's going to talk about the language server.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. So the Bazel language server that I'm going to talk about and also have a demo prepared is essentially the headless piece of the Bazel Eclipse feature. And the way it works so beautifully is that the Java language support in VS Code is entirely based on Eclipse as well. Let's have a look. So obviously you will see the same features that you see in the VS Code that you know from the VS Code Java support as well as from the Bazel Eclipse feature. We do support full and partial project views. That's very important, especially when working on a monolith in large code bases. You don't want to load all the files into VS Code. Class path support is exactly the same as in the Bazel Eclipse feature. So any new support that gets added into the Bazel Eclipse feature or into the Bazel language server will benefit both projects equally. We do support running the bulk of Java applications in VS Code and also running and debugging unit tests with the test support that exists in VS Code. For now, we still require you to manually download the extension for VS Code and install it. Eventually, we want to go and publish it into the marketplace, the VS Code marketplace. However, we have not decided yet on the final naming for this. All right, so let's jump into a little demo. First thing we'll do is go to the Git repo of the Bazel VS Code for Java development extension. And there you'll have the link to the releases page. And on the releases page, there will always be the latest release published by our GitHub build action, where you can download the VS Code extension file. So click on the file and save it to a local folder. In this demo, I'm going to use a little small sample project that we created and published on GitHub as well. So it just contains 3 modules, which look pretty similar to Maven modules. They have Java folder with source code and the build file. And make sure it builds, because this is very important. And let's start code in this directory. So once VS Code opens, the first thing we'll do is we'll install the extension from the file. And you click on the three dots, and then you say select install from VSIX file. And there, you just select the file that we downloaded from our code repository from the releases page. And you let that finish. It will actually install not just the VS Code for Java extension that we built, but it will also install a couple of additional extensions, mainly for debug supporting, for running tests, and the language server that is shipped by Red Hat. Once the installation finished, I would like you to make you aware of a few important settings that you have to do in your user configuration. So the first two items, I recommend disabling Maven and Gradle support. The third one, which is pretty important, you need to enable the Bazel importer for GDTLS for the Java language server. So you need to set bazel.enable to true. The default is still false. And then there's two more options, one for the source path and then more from the test path. So the way the Bazel project kind of works is similar to how Bazel Eclipse feature works, is that it detects or it expects a common layout in the project. And in that common layout, you can actually configure the path, the location of the source folder and the test sources. And then it will set up the class path properly for those. Okay, so once you have those settings set up, let's restart VS Code one more time, and then we're ready to open a source file. Okay, so once VS Code is back up, let's open our first Java file. It will start the language server. You can track the language server starting with the spinning wheel on the bottom. It is actually now analyzing the project, scanning for the Bazel build files, and discovering packages. Once everything is ready, you will see the thumbs up. That's pretty important. If you don't see it, something might wrong, so you need to check the log file. And now we're ready for some Java development. Content Assist is available. It works based on the class path, what's specified in the Bazel build files as dependencies. This is extremely similar to Bazel Eclipse. An interesting feature that is also supported is running code and debugging code right from within VS Code. So with the debug extension, you can just click on this little debug highlight, and then it starts the main the Java code in debug mode and stops at the breakpoint that we have here. And then you can just use regular stepping and run it. What else can you do? Navigation. So you can follow and jump into the methods that define something. For a full list of all available features, please go to the Red Hat-developer/VS Code-Java repository. It has a list of features that are supported by the VS Code Java extension and the Java language server for VS Code. And the Bazel extension that we've built is literally just an extension or a plugin into that Red Hat language server for VS Code. Okay, that was it for the demo. Yeah, so the other thing that we're looking at in the future for the Bazel language server is we want your feedback. If this is useful, if there's interest in the community in this effort, if there's someone interested in moving this forward with us, then we're totally open to collaborating on this. Specifically, there's things like Windows support that we're totally not testing the language server with. Also, if you have more complicated Java-based projects, we want to hear from you and also possibly see your contributions, how the class path is working out for you, or if you're experiencing lack of support for specific situations. All right, and that's it. Thanks very much for joining our session. I'm looking forward to your questions and contributions.
Thank you, everyone.